Part 90. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 903. Don't worry, you will be next. Regarding Sister Chu's cold words, Fatty didn't have much psychological fluctuations. He was no longer a young child, both mentally and physically. At this moment, what kept swirling in Fatty's mind was the image of Subai being shot in the head. The gunshot was like a poisonous sting, constantly piercing Fatty's mind, making Fatty feel a little unreal. All of these. It's all too false. How could you die? It's just that your head was blown off. How could you die? Why are you still lying there motionless? Don't you like hurting each other the most? Get up. Get up and kill this woman. Get up. Isn't it fun for you to lie on the ground and pretend to be dead to scare me? I'm humming your uncle, get up quickly. The fat man's body was shaking constantly, and the piles of fat seemed to be dancing. He really didn't believe that Subai was dead, but Subai was actually killed in front of him, and Fatty knew very well that he and Subai were both ordinary people now. In the past, even if Subai was killed, even if it is broken, he can still reshape his body as long as there is enough power in his blood, but in this story world, it is impossible. Sister Chu slowly aimed her gun at Fatty, who was seriously injured. Her fear of these two people did not diminish at all just because she became the final winner. In fact, she did not really deliberately drag him down. The last move was because they actually arranged a ghost wall breaking spell in the area leading out of the corridor. If they had broken through it later, the outcome would have been decided. Even if they had a gun, the opponent could definitely do it. Retreat temporarily and then look for an opportunity to attack yourself. Whether it is from the arrangement or the process, it can be seen that these two murderers are indeed real desperados, and they are so thoughtful that it is incredible. They would have almost won, if they had a gun in their hands, they would really have won. The two murderer NPCs designed by radio broadcasting in this story world are indeed terrifying. A smile appeared on Sister Chu's lips. She was the final winner. Looking at the fat man, she pulled the trigger without much hesitation. Click. But the gunshot didn't sound, which made Sister Chu's face show a look of confusion. It was impossible that there were no bullets left. This was absolutely impossible. She knew very well how many bullets were left in the chamber of her gun. In the eyes of the fat man, the woman in front of him just kept looking at him with a smile, but did not pull the trigger. But slowly, the calmness on the woman's face disappeared, revealing a look of panic. Immediately afterwards, the woman pulled out her dagger as if going crazy and rushed to the tree in the yard. She kept stabbing the tree with the dagger, scraping out a large piece of bark. The fat man who saw the scene did not feel any pleasure in surviving the disaster, but directly cursed. You uncle, have you been watching the show until now? The old man's stooped figure emerged from the darkness on one side. He was in poor health. The fat man had drained too much of his energy into drawing various talisman papers. At this time, an evil talisman appeared. Floating in his palm, it kept spinning. If you look carefully, you can see that there is a light green light lingering on the evil talisman, and there is a similar light lingering between Sister Chu's eyebrows. The old man staggered a little. He was a little dissatisfied with the fat man's oppression of him, and now the fat man's accusations and abuses made him feel very upset. However, he also knew that if he did not take this opportunity to take revenge, I'm afraid this revenge will be difficult to avenge. Of course, there is also his own corpse puppet. Does it also need to be recycled? Sister Chu is obviously still addicted to the illusion and can't extricate herself, or she hasn't realized what kind of situation she is in. It has to be said that the old man chose the time to take action very well. When a person feels that he is about to win everything, time suddenly attacked her. The dawn before victory is always the most relaxing moment. This illusion directly penetrated Sister Chu's psychological defense and let her in. When Subai and the fat man set off, the old man lay weakly on the bed as if he had been squeezed by 7 or 8 women all night. But people are really like sponges. When you feel that you have lost your strength, squeeze yourself harder, there is always a little juice that can be squeezed out. This is the case for the old man now. Moreover, he is a ruthless person who can even take out his own daughter to renew his life. At any time, he will leave some for himself. There is room for hindsight. He didn't care whether Subai died or not, because in his eyes, Subai was far less valuable to him than this fat man. Many things in this fat man's mind were what he valued most. But the next moment, a look of horror appeared in the old man's mind, because he found that he couldn't really kill Sister Chu, who was already in the urn. This woman's will was very tenacious, and even if he used the fat man's teachings, his runes dragged him into the illusion, but he still couldn't kill him. Once he induced death in the illusion, the other party would probably be stimulated to wake up. The old man took a deep breath. He planned to take the pistol from the woman's hand, but when he just took a step, Sister Chu's body suddenly trembled, and a clear look appeared in her eyes. This was the sign that she was about to leave. A sign of awakening from the illusion. The runes can't be too close. She's not an ordinary person and won't be scared easily, Fatty said. The old man looked at the fat man and then at Sister Qu. He knew clearly that the fat man was right. Although he had just learned this rune, he could feel it. Not only could he not get too close to her, and even if her murderous intentions were stronger, this woman would break through the illusion in an instant. He could only trap her now, but he couldn't kill her himself. This situation made him feel terrible. "Help me put the evil talisman on it," the fat man said feebly to the old man. The old man hesitated for a moment. He knew the function of that evil talisman. It was an evil talisman that could summon nearby dead souls in a short period of time. And the most amazing thing was that while stimulating his body's potential, this evil talisman, also the Zhangxie talisman, can also allow the user to keep his or her spiritual platform clear and clear, and his or her consciousness will not be occupied by magpie nest doves. As far as he knew, even in the Taoist sects of Mission or Longhu Mountain, there was no such kind of spirit-inviting talisman. The Taoist priests in Mission or Longhu Mountain sometimes invited their ancestors to be possessed, and occasionally they were accidentally possessed by some spirit that came to visit them. He did some uncivilized things behind his back. But whether to let this fat man who had lost the ability to move become lively and vigorous again in a short period of time made the old man hesitate. He could feel that this fat man was not satisfied with the death of the guy just now and with him watching the show next to him and taking action now. "I was very angry when I planned to use the mantis to catch the cicada and the oriole behind. There are still 30 seconds, Fatty smiled, she will wake up." Gritting his teeth, the old man waved his finger, and a black evil energy pierced the talisman beside the fat man's palm. The talisman floated up and landed on the fat man's forehead. The old man was betting that the fat man's first target within the limited time would be the woman who just killed the guy. The fat man felt that his body, which had just been so weak that he was about to die, had strength at this moment. He stood up immediately and walked directly towards Sister Chu. Sister Chu frowned tightly, as if she had a premonition that something dangerous was about to happen, and the old man obviously couldn't hold on any longer. The next moment, Sister Chu closed her eyes and opened them again. Her vision was completely clear again. A stream of black blood overflowed from the corner of the old man's mouth on one side. He fell to his knees on the ground, gasping for air. Boom! When Sister Chu regained consciousness, she immediately raised her gun and pulled the trigger at the fat man who was near her. However, the fat man who had been shot did not sway at all and did not even feel the slightest pain. He rushed forward as usual. When you use this talisman, your brain and body are completely separated, and the pain of your body cannot be transmitted to your brain. Moreover, the fat man is now angry. Puff. The fat man bit his sister on the neck. He was not a vampire, he was just an ordinary person at this time, but he pressed his sister down with his own weight. His sister's gun-holding wrist was also pressed hard by the fat man. Sister Chu kept hitting the fat man's chest with her legs, and even launched an attack on the man's vitality gate, but the fat man still didn't notice. Even if the eunuch was hit hard a few times, he would feel helpless. Bear it, but the fat man is now an unconscious walking zombie. Bite. Scratching. Respite. Collision. As if a wild boar was taking revenge, the fat man looked even crazier now than when Subai was sick, because he had basically completely lost his mind now, and he didn't even know whether his current body would still be there after the effect of the talisman faded away. Can you survive? Slowly, the fat man found that the woman under him began to weaken her struggle. Gradually, the woman seemed to have completely lost her life. He was not sure whether the woman was dead or fainted, because he himself was also a little confused at this time. The talisman on my forehead is slowly turning into ashes. The fat man felt that waves of pain from his body were desperately sweeping through his mind, especially the pain in his crotch that made him feel heartbroken. Fortunately, this pain did not last long. Excessive blood loss plus various external and internal injuries. The fat man felt that the fire of his life was slowly fading away. To the end. The fat man raised his head and let out an unwilling growl. Then, he slumped down and lay on Sister Chu's body. This time. Is it really over? Grass. Dabai. Fatty, I'm here to find you. Go to hell with your mother's second generation. I have to avenge you. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 904. Ding ding ding, ding ding ding, ding ding ding, ding ding ding. A string of bells with a special rhythm rang. In the old house where Subai and the fat man first appeared, the old man had disheveled hair and was mumbling something. The bells in his hands made a crisp sound, with a kind of heart-rending mystery. In the center of the living room of the house, there is a dark red altar table with 2 candles lit and several plates of offerings. The sacrifices seemed a bit sparse, because the blockade of the village had not been lifted, but there was a trend of it being lifted. The old man felt this very deeply, and the feeling of depression that had been lingering in his heart was getting stronger day by day. Reduce. However, although the village has not yet reached the point of being short of food and clothing, there is still plenty of food, but the rest of the snacks, such as fruit plates, are naturally very few, so the tributes seem a bit shabby. He spent 3 days to repair some of his frail body and regain some energy. Then, he couldn't wait to start preparing for this ritual. Because of the 3 days and the isolation of the village, the old man could be sure that the fat man's ghost was still wandering here and could not get out. At the same time, it was not time for the ghosts to take him away, but after that, when the blockade of the village is lifted in a few days, it's hard to say whether he will be able to find the deceased soul of the fat man. Therefore, he didn't care that he had not yet recovered his skills and forcefully started the soul summoning ceremony. He couldn't let the fat man with so many secrets in his mind just disappear. He wanted to refine the fat man into one of his own puppets just like he refined the strangled ghost puppet before. He needs the secret in that fat man's mind. With it, he can take a step forward in his cultivation. This is an irresistible temptation. Moreover, helping the fat man draw talismans in the past 2 days gave the old man a feeling that what the fat man showed was actually just the tip of the iceberg of his true abilities. But even if it was the tip of the iceberg, for the old man himself, it was really like entering a new realm. Ding ding ding, ding ding ding, ding ding ding. 3 evil talismans were attached to a scarecrow. As the old man chanted over and over again, a layer of light gradually began to bloom on the evil talismans. In the dark, an unpredictable connection between ghosts and gods was being established. This for the wandering souls, it is like a guiding light in the middle of the night. The old man kept dancing. Keep singing. There was a straw mat diagonally below the offering table, and on it lay the body of the fat man. That night, the old man only brought back the body of the fat man. As for the rest of the people, it seemed that they were collected by the police the next day. They were placed together with the previous corpses. Because the sky, which used to be dark no matter what the daytime, seems to be slowly clearing up recently, along with the clearing up, are also the nervous emotions in the hearts of the local villagers. No matter what the damn reason is for this strange closure, things are getting better, and the day when everyone will be free again is approaching. There have been many cases in the village recently, including thefts, rapes, fights, etc. The most serious thing is that there were nearly 10 corpses left in the house, all of them young people. Fortunately, there was a group of policemen in the village. Under the suppression of Officer Sue, the situation was finally prevented from completely collapsing, and there were signs that the sky would clear up and everything would return to normal. The restless hearts of the villagers gradually began to calm down, and Officer Sue also he specifically asked his men to collect the bodies of the dead and place them in order to make it easier for him to hand over the file after the village was connected to the outside world. For Officer Sue, this strange incident is likely to be a turning point in his career, so he is very concerned about the details and perfection of his answer sheet. Back at the old house, the old man supported his body and danced and sang for more than an hour. If it weren't for the pursuit of his dream, he might have collapsed from exhaustion. And the scarecrow with 3 evil talismans attached to it gradually began to float, and the induction had been established. In this way, the fat man's dead soul was summoned back and sent back to the place that had been repaired and restricted by himself. In the body, then he is equivalent to possessing a living corpse. The most valuable thing about this living corpse is not its combat power, but the things in his mind, which makes the old man salivate. You didn't expect it? You asked me to draw a lot of talismans at first, but I discovered that this talisman not only has the effect of condensing breath, but also has the effect of gathering souls. With the talisman paper you taught me, I can draw you. I have treated you well by suppressing my own soul. The old man let out a low shout. The flames of the 2 candles on the altar turned cyan in an instant, like ghost fires, with a chilly air. At this time, in the living room, the cries of ghosts could also be vaguely heard. Anywhere where living people gather, there must be a lot of lonely ghosts around. This is a normal thing, just like when the fat man wanted to show off his skills but was inexplicably possessed by a wild ghost. Play the opera. But the old man took out a dagger and cut his arm open. He wiped his palm and blood soaked it. He walked to the body of the fat man, bent down, and drew another talisman on the fat man's face. He waved his hand, and the scarecrow, which was already floating in the air, landed on the chest of the fat man's body. Thump! There was a crisp sound, and the fat man's body seemed to tremble. But after trembling for a moment, there was no sound again. The old man was surprised for a moment and muttered, "That's not right. Could it be that the sacrifice was not enough?" The fat man said that he was a white ghost, but the old man didn't believe it. He thought that the fat man should be the corpse of a senior who practiced evil arts and resurrected after his death. However, maybe this person's soul was a little strange, so the price for summoning him back was higher. Puff! The old man made a new cut on his arm and dripped his blood on the scarecrow. The soul is back, the soul is back. The old man kept squeezing his arm. This blood sacrifice can only be used by the caster, that is, the summoner's own blood. Moreover, the old man is also a man of cultivation. This blood is naturally different from ordinary people. It is just random. As the blood continued to flow out, the old man who had just been recovering for a few days felt dizzy again, and his face began to turn pale again, but he still gritted his teeth and persisted. His own blood kept falling on the scarecrow, and the scarecrow absorbed it directly, but the fat man's body remained motionless, as if he hadn't had enough to eat. Suddenly a dark wind blew up from deep in the forest, blowing away the fallen leaves all over the ground. Where the fallen leaves were originally covered, a formation drawn with blood appeared. On each of the 7 corners of the formation, there was a small wooden stick. The stakes were fixed there, and there was actually a scarecrow on each stake, and this scarecrow was exactly the same as the one used by the old man in the village who was casting spells. 7 wooden stakes and 7 scarecrows began to sway in the cold wind, and blood stains gradually began to seep from these 7 scarecrows, and a faint mist of blood began to fill the air. The formation seemed to be activated as a result, and the wind around them became even more intense. The soil in the center of the formation began to peel off slowly, revealing 2 dolls placed on the plate. The dolls were one large and one small. To be precise, one was a normal small doll, and the other was. The aspect ratio is obviously inconsistent, and there is a red rope tied between the 2 dolls. There was a talisman paper stuck inside the 7 scarecrows around. When the blood soaked into it, the evil talisman was directly activated. First, the fatter puppet floated first. The old man's voice began to be heard vaguely from all around, but it was absolutely impossible for that old man to know that there was another magic circle in the small forest not far from the village, and the blood he sacrificed was actually transmitted here, thus opening the this formation. A black mist began to wander around, and finally flew into the formation like a lost lamb. The blood mist in the formation began to condense into the black mist, and finally, all the black mist disappeared into the floating fat man. On my body. Slowly, a half-illusory and half-illusory transparent soul appeared, revealing the appearance of a fat man. Hee, it's done. Damn it, I knew that old guy would definitely recall the dead soul of Fatty to tap into Fatty's great wisdom, but that old guy didn't use his brain to think about it. Fatty asked him to draw so many talisman, why did I only use 2 in the end? It turned out that the rest of the talismans had been placed here by Fatty a long time ago. Dabai, wake up, your mother is telling you to go home and get sick. The fat man's shadow began to melt, and finally turned into the fat doll. At this time, after the fat doll landed on the ground, it directly hit the other one. The lifeless doll was lifted up and patted. Dabai, come back soon. The 2 dolls were actually tied with a red thread. The reason why the old man felt that summoning Fatty was so tiring and costly was because Fatty knew clearly that the old man would only summon his own soul. After all, Subai was of no use to him. But Fatty has been prepared for a long time. This red line is called the soul locking line. It is usually used when entering into a ghost marriage. Fatty is forcibly binding himself to Dabai. The old man will either not recruit one, or he will have to recruit 2. It is a binding consumption that forcibly deceives consumers. But the fat puppet shouted for a long time, and the 7 scarecrows around him began to lose their color. However, the puppet here still made no movement. Hey, Dabai, why haven't you come back yet? That old man is probably bleeding out. Suddenly, the fat doll suddenly felt that the sky seemed to be getting darker. He raised his head and saw that a layer of dark clouds was falling, blocking the surrounding sunlight. This is... The fat doll shivered in fright. After all, he was now possessed by a soul, so the feeling was very clear and profound. Damn it, uncle, we agreed to attach a doll to restore Yang, but you actually turned into a ghost yourself. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 905. The old man over there must have given up, at least that's how the fat man felt, because the 7 scarecrows around him began to become sluggish, and the original hay began to show a gray color, not burning, but there is really no difference between the ending of being burned, unless the old man is really determined to fight desperately, but the fat man still feels that the old man must be very afraid of death, and it is unlikely that he will really risk his life. But what makes Fatty very unhappy is that the dark cloud above his head seems to be deliberately teasing him. It just hovers like this and never comes down, let alone enters the puppet he prepared in advance. We agreed to show off together, but you secretly baked it behind my back. The fat doll floated, as if he was planning to go up and argue with the dark clouds. He didn't play like this. The fat man was afraid that his soul would slowly dissipate after being outside for too long, so he had to place his soul on the doll. But what the hell? You can keep surfing outside. The dark clouds fell at this time, and Sudbai's figure slowly condensed. Sudbai reached out and touched the back of his head, and held the fat doll in his hand with his other hand. The fat doll began to struggle, and this feeling gave the illusion of a strong embrace. Your uncle, why is your soul strength so high? The fat doll was very unhappy, because with Sudbai's current soul strength, there is no need to find sustenance like other ghosts, and he can completely rely on his soul body to float around. I don't know either. Sudbai shook his head. This is the first time I have truly died and turned into a wandering soul. This is a fact, and it is also because the world of this story is special, allowing creatures such as souls to exist, so Sudbai can be summoned to recondensate the dead souls after his true death. As for whether the state can be judged as survival, it's something that broadcasters need to consider, but it's probably okay. After all, you still have a body now, and you also have your own thinking ability. From a broad perspective, you can indeed be called alive. As for the rest of the dead, you have to have their souls summoned back. For example, the guy who was strangled to death by the fat man at the beginning had his soul summoned back by the old man, but his thinking pattern was erased and he became a gooey puppet. Such a positioning existence is probably impossible to pass through the broadcast, which means that he has been judged to be dead. This game is like a real person CS. If you are hit by a paintball, you will be GG. It is also a bit similar to military exercises. Everyone can roughly understand the criteria for determining life and death. After all, radio is a very reasonable existence. But can you explain why I have to possess this thing, and you can actually turn into a ghost directly? The fat doll still felt unbalanced. Maybe it's because... Sudbai pondered for a moment, as if thinking about God. It was a memory that he didn't like to recall so much. You have seen those two old photos. The fat doll was stunned, and then said nothing. Yes, in that old family photo, Sudbai was already a ghost. In a certain sense, Sudbai is just a ghost magpie nest dove that has taken over another person's body. Although Sudbai has recovered his memory, and there are still many memories that are difficult to sort out, Sudbai still has a long-term relationship. It was an indisputable fact that he was a ghost wandering around the house for many years. Now, his physical body is limited to the story world. Because of the special rules and environment in the story world, after his physical body dies, he changes back to his original self. Coupled with the stimulation of resentment when he died, it is not difficult to understand that he directly turned into a ghost. Essentially, this story world is set up by two people, Fatty and Sudbai, who are not the audience. After all, their bodies are the same as their original appearances. This damn story world setting. The fat doll let out a long sigh of relief. Bye-bye, I think broadcasting is very powerful now. A story world is far more complicated than I imagined. Now, it seems that this is not the time to sigh. Sudbai's soul body was darker in color, much more solid than when Fatty was revealed before, and there were a lot of evil spirits swirling around him. What's wrong? If nothing happens, all those guys should be dead. As long as we can find their bodies now, I think the meat will be enough. And since we are all ghosts now, we can also sell our own meat. So that there is no arrangement for broadcasting that bloody plot. I was really afraid of how we would make a choice in the end when we were only short of the amount of meat of a corpse. That would be really scary. I feel like something is looking for me. He wants me to go back. Subai looked at the fat doll and asked, do you know what it could be? Isn't there some bullshit listener who's still alive? The fat doll said with some pain, the radio has cheated on it again. No, it's not like the audience. I feel that the audience's affairs have ended that night. The thing that called me is more like a native in this story world. It seems to have existed for eternity. I don't know what I feel like. How did it come about, but there is an aura about him that makes me tremble, just like the principle of all things interacting with each other. Wait a minute, I'm a fool. The fat man's idol thought of something, and then said in a tone that made him laugh or cry, according to the environment and background of the story world, there should be some ghosts coming to arrest him. Are you done? Ghost, Subai said a little speechlessly, why haven't I seen him before? In the past, you took the initiative to send out your soul body, or you gave up your body and released your soul. However, ghosts only targeted ghosts. What are ghosts? They are the souls of ordinary people who wander after death. There are many prerequisites, such as monks or cultivators. The kind of people who are upright and upright are actually not within the scope of apprehension by ghosts. The most damning thing about this story world is that we are all set up to be ordinary people. We are dead now. I am okay. I am just a soul body. Ghosts like me will not care. Otherwise, so many people will die every day. They have their hands full, but you are the typical example of what they have to deal with. Oh, Subai nodded, but it seemed like he didn't take it seriously. Now try to see if you can dissipate your own anger and merge into the puppet I made for you before. Then find a way to possess a person and burn some paper money there. Maybe you can fool the ghost. On this ground the ground is like a bird. Dissipate the hostility, Subai said with some surprise. What can be done to dissipate it? I feel pretty good now, at least much more comfortable than when I was an ordinary person. I even feel that some of my skills and abilities are still intact in this state. Could use some. We want to sell meat and do tasks to leave the story world, not to imitate Monkey King and cause trouble in the underworld. The fat doll said helplessly, Dabai, listen to me, can we live in peace? Who knows the story of broadcast design? How many skills have been given to the guys in the underworld in the world, and I think that we are now summoned from ordinary people after death to undead souls, which can be regarded as taking advantage of a loophole in the story world of broadcast design. According to the character of broadcast, after a loophole appears, it will spend more energy to close the loophole. I really have something to do, Subai said seriously. This is an opportunity. Not only is this a pure soul body, but this soul is also very malleable. I haven't encountered anything like this in a long time. This is an opportunity to be able to make breakthroughs conveniently in the environment of the story world. Breakthrough. The first turn of the ancient zombie is for body refining, and the second turn is for soul refining. This is my best chance. Subai seemed to have thought of something again. Fat man, I will help you find someone to take over first, and then we will go and get those corpses out and see if the meat content can reach the standard without using my corpse. You want your body? It's better to use your own body, Subai replied. At this moment, there was a sudden sound of Suana in the distance, but there was no one around at all. The fat man must have been looking for an absolutely hidden place when he chose this location to hide the formation. It's so cold. Is this a ghost coming? Fatty said nervously. Dabai, are you really not going to consider my suggestion anymore? If you can live now, you will die in the future. We have to hurry up. After Subai finished speaking, he took the fat doll in his hand and planned to leave here, but things seemed not that simple. Just as the fat man said, this time the two of them have exploited a loophole in the broadcasting rules, so the broadcasting response will be very extreme. Before Subai could leave with the fat man, a burst of paper money fell all around, and the sound of the Suana behind him became clearer. As the paper money fell, a barrier was set up around him. Damn it, It's not like Gamai can use this skill. Dabai, you've hit a big deal this time, Fatty said anxiously. Let me out, he won't care about me. Subai heard this and threw Fatty out. Sure enough, Fatty's puppet body flew directly through the barrier without causing any damage to him. Hee, I really bumped into you. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Subai. This person was wearing a white robe and a high crown on his head. The words "Get rich at first sight" were written on the hat, and his tongue he stretched out his long hair, but it did not affect his speech. He also held a long white feather duster in his left hand, but Subai knew that this was not a feather duster, but a mourning stick. Probably all Chinese people will be familiar with the image of the guy in front of them. Come on, something happened here a few days ago. I came here specially to take a look today, and I happened to meet you. That's all. Seeing that you didn't kill anyone after becoming a ghost, so just follow me down. I'll give you a ghost job. The fat man who was left far away shivered immediately when he saw the scene over there. Oh my god, why don't you exaggerate so much and just show Bai Chang? Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 906. Bai Chang appeared, which didn't surprise Subai too much, because Fatty had just said that it might be a ghost coming here, and Subai subconsciously thought that Bai Chang was also a kind of ghost. After all, Subai and Fatty were friends. Majors are different, so looking at things across majors will naturally lead to large errors. At least, Subai was not as scared as Fatty was when he saw Bai Chang. Of course, Fatty also came to the conclusion based on his current situation, but although Subai was in the body of a ghost now, he had a little more power than at the beginning. Self-confidence and mentality are definitely different. Bai Chang invited himself to work as a ghost servant in the underworld, which is equivalent to going to the underworld to work as a civil servant. However, Subai could not agree. Subai did not know where the underworld was, but it was definitely beyond the scope of this village. Taking this village as the starting point is the main point. In the area where the plot takes place, once you run away blindly, you are going to the foggy area in the game. Bugs are likely to occur. Subai followed Bai Chang to the underworld to work, and Monkey Sun came to the underworld again and beat Subai with a stick. Shoot to death. Why, you don't want to? Bai Chang's tone has always been the same when he spoke, and he also has a pale and perverted face. It is difficult for you to infer his mental activities from his expression and tone, but as long as your brain is not stupid enough to be anyone who was kicked by the donkey should be able to feel that Mr. Xie, Bai Chang's real name is Xiebian, must be feeling unhappy now. Can you give me a few days of grace? I still have some unfinished business. Subai could only say this. After he had completed the second level of Ancient Zombies and the fat man had prepared the meat and sold it, everyone would leave the story directly. The world, let alone the doves of Bai Chang, what will happen if it is the doves of Tathagata Buddha? He, the king of hell told you to die at the third watch, who would dare to leave you until the fifth watch? I have given you the position of a ghost, which is your great blessing. Since you don't know how to cherish it, I will personally take you down. The morning stick in Bai Chang's hand shook, and in an instant, there was a sound of ghosts crying and wolf howling coming from all around. Subai felt that his soul body began to vibrate. This morning stick is a soul magic weapon, specially designed to restrain the soul. Subai didn't want to fight Bai Chang. He had no interest in fighting the natives here in the state. At that moment, his body flashed and turned into a black light and shot away directly from a distance. The guy who just turned into a fierce ghost can actually use escape skills, Bai Chang murmured to himself. It seems that he was also an onmyoji before he was alive. How can I continue to let you go with such a person? The souls of the dead remain in the world. Bai Chang's figure immediately turned into a white light and chased after him. In fact, Bai Chang wrongly blamed Subai. His escape technique was nothing more than using the energy of his current soul body based on his previous experience. To outsiders, it looked like he was using magic. After all, Baivuchang didn't know this world. There are also existences such as audience with such a high level of strength. The real world is a place covered by broadcasting. All existences that are different from intermediate technological civilization will be suppressed, such as the situation of the gold on the jade seal. But with Sudbai's strength, if he switches to if we were to go to the plane of journey to the west, this Baivuchang would really not be able to catch Sudbai's eyes. How could a big zombie that had almost reached the strength level of the zombie king be provoked by a bad guy? Seeing Sudbai and Baivuchang over there turning into two lights, one black and one white, playing a chasing game, Fatty was stunned for a while, and then controlled his current body, the fat doll, to look for the unlucky ghost who could possess him. No matter what happened to Sudbai, he still had to find the corpse he needed and then remove the meat. Someone had to complete this task. Boy, you have some skills. Baivuchang was much faster than Sudbai, and his own cultivation level was not enough for a fierce ghost to challenge. However, Sudbai relied on his control of power to forcefully circle around the village twice with Baivuchang. Later, Baivuchang couldn't stand being teased like this by a new evil ghost, so he threw out a string of soul calling bells on him and rearranged a larger barrier, trapping Sudbai in a fixed area. Given his status, if word spreads about catching ghosts like this, he will be laughed at. People want face, ghosts want face even more. Sudbai's move of leaving first without causing trouble was regarded by Baivuchang as an offense to himself. Sudbai's figure paused in mid-air, looking at Baivuchang in front of him. He couldn't run anymore, but he was captured and taken back to the underworld by Baivuchang. It is said that there is a book of life and death in the underworld, but there is also a radio broadcast. In the story world, it is really a good choice to offend a Baivuchang or offend the rules of the broadcast game, which is more serious. I'll be captured. Baivuchang opened his mouth, and a white bolt roared out, trying to wrap Sudbai. Sudbai quickly moved away and successfully avoided it. In fact, Baivuchang's strength was definitely higher than his own, let alone mentioning it. However, the opponent's combat experience was indeed a bit lacking. I don't know if it was because of his usual work. The pressure is not great. After all, no matter how stubborn the ghost is in the underworld, he can't make any trouble in front of him. Higher level ghosts and supernatural beings are not under his control. The targets within his responsibilities are just a dozen morning sticks. It's basically like surrendering a gun. Under such circumstances, it is obviously impossible for Baivuchang to be extraordinarily rich in combat experience. The 8 Banners soldiers who were said to be invincible after entering the customs were easily beaten by San Francisco within a few years. This is almost the same reason. In Sudbai's opinion, Baivuchang looked a bit like an ordinary listener with many good magic weapons on his body. If he was given the same level of strength as him, Sudbai was confident that he would blow this guy up. The next moment, Sudbai's figure appeared behind Baivuchang, and he slapped it directly with his palm. Of course, this is just a manifestation of the soul body. The ghost's resentment itself is its own energy attribute, with certain the killing effect. Snapped. Baivuchang received a slap on Sudbai's back, but did not move. Then, Baivuchang turned his head 180 degrees and looked at Sudbai with a mocking smile. You are really disobedient. Is the ghost's attack ineffective against it? Sudbai was shocked. He didn't expect this situation. No wonder this guy didn't have much combat experience. In this line of work, he faced fierce ghosts, but the ghost's method had no effect on him. He could be directly immune, which was equivalent to giving himself a bonus. If you have an unlimited blood tank and a set of magical equipment to fight monsters, it will really be damned if you can practice your skills. Baivuchang stretched out his hand, and for a moment, the surrounding space was frozen. Then his other hand stretched out freely, intending to capture Sudbai. Sudbai is flustered but not confused. Ghost energy has no effect on you, right? But I don't just know this. A layer of lavender light suddenly rose in Sudbai's palm. This was the evil spirit of zombies. It was another energy state that Sudbai had just transformed from his own resentment. Sudbai looked a bit like a ghost after turning into a ghost. It's like a fish in the sea. Although Li Gui's strength has great restrictions on him, the ordinary person imprisonment imposed on him since entering the story world has been lifted, so Fatty said that the two of them took advantage of it. Broadcast a bug when designing the story world. Boom. This time, Sudbai placed his palm directly on Bai Vuchang's face. He only heard the sizzling sound of the underwater oil pan, and most of Bai Vuchang's face was melted by Sudbai. Ah! The soul body is actually very similar to the human body. For example, if the face is hit, it will hurt. While Bai Vuchang screamed, Sudbai retreated quickly and escaped from Bai Vuchang's control area. Damn, what's going on? This is the evil spirit belonging to zombies. How can a dead soul have this, and how can a zombie have a dead soul? Bai Vuchang cursed while repairing his face. Soon his face returned to its original shape, but Sudbai's figure was long gone. You can't escape, I swear, I will find you, take you back to the underworld, and throw you into the 18th level of hell. You have desecrated me, you are so brave. The fat doll is floating around in the village. The fat man is looking for someone suitable to possess him. There are prerequisites for this. First, you have to find someone who has been relatively low in luck recently. However, because the village is closed, the whole village people have spent so many days in panic and turmoil. It seems that everyone's luck is very bad. This problem is not that big. But in addition to those with relatively low fortune, you also have to find someone with a suitable physique. At least they cannot be disabled, consumptive, or physically weak. Otherwise, you will become seriously ill and unable to afford it once possessed, which is a waste of time. After searching around, Fatty found his favorite target, which was Officer Su. If he possessed him, it would be very convenient for him to get corpses or sell meat. However, just as the fat man was happily slamming into Officer Su's body, the national emblem of Officer Su's police uniform suddenly emitted a light that ordinary people could not see. The fat man who was about to beat Officer Su's soul and take possession of it only felt it above his head. Suddenly a huge red sun appeared, and then the high-pitched march of the volunteers sounded all around. Rise up, you who do not want to be slaves. The fat man felt that his soul and body were about to be torn apart, and his whole body was knocked out. Even the fat puppet fell directly from the windowsill. Your uncle's broadcast. The fat man cursed in his heart. Of course he knew what was going on. The broadcast set Officer Su up to be a character similar to a saint who loves the party, patriotism, and selfless devotion. Such a person will naturally be blessed by the national emblem on his body. Similar to a half-saint who is immune to all evil. The fat doll that fell in the messy flower bed still had a little black smoke on it. At this moment, a big yellow dog happened to pass by here, opened its mouth and bit the fat doll directly in its mouth. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 907. Sudbai wasn't sure how long he could get rid of that Bai Vuchang. That guy had a lot of magical weapons and was specialized in arresting ghosts. In his current state, it was almost impossible to completely escape from the other party's tracking. Possible things, and therefore, I must seize the time. There have been a lot of things happening in the village recently, and the police also shot and killed several guys who tried to fish in troubled waters during this period. Therefore, in the slightly shady vacant room, leaving aside Sudbai, the fat man, and the group of listeners, there are actually about 20 corpses, which is enough to show how crazy an isolated environment is for human nature. Subai's eyes first fell on his own body, but his head was blown open and a big hole appeared on the back of his head. This also forced Subai to abandon his body. Of course, there was another point. I'm afraid that after using my own body, there won't be enough meat in the end and I'll be a little bit disappointed. Although there are a lot of corpses in the audience here, who knows if there will be some evil fun at the end of the broadcast. Anyway, the possessed body of the fat man will not look for his original body. As long as he does not choose his own body, even if the meat is not enough in the end, at least the two of them will not face the dilemma of killing each other. After looking around, Subai finally chose a young man who was about 17 or 18 years old. The young man must have been strangled and there were clear bruises on his neck. Therefore, his body was well preserved and suitable for him to go possessed. The difference with Fatty's possession is that Fatty's current soul state is much lower than that of Subai, so he can only find living creatures, which is a bit like a ghost. Subai wants to practice the second level of ancient zombie and possess him. He will inevitably become a zombie, so the body of a dead person who has already had corpse energy in his body is his best choice. At that moment, Subai walked to the young man's body and slowly lay down. The two gradually began to overlap, and finally Subai's soul gradually disappeared. About 10 seconds later, the young man's eyes suddenly opened, with a dark purple glow in his eyes. This body is not bad. A smile appeared at the corner of Subai's mouth, and hair began to grow on his body. It was white hair at first, but the white hair quickly faded away, and finally the skin began to turn dark blue. Standing up and sitting cross-legged, Subai made a secret with both hands and began to use the mental technique of Guzong's second transformation. Faint cyan halos continued to emanate from his body, and the corpse energy of the corpses around him also began to be transformed and absorbed by it. Although it is a drop in the bucket, it is better than nothing. This environment is naturally not as convenient as the underworld in the land of enlightenment, but now Subai does not want to regain his strength after breaking through here. He only pursues the breakthrough. As long as he breaks through, he will wait until he leaves the story world. There will be enough time to completely consolidate the second transformation of Guzheng. This is just like the difference between theoretical research and physical research. Theory guides practice. It is much faster to figure out the things on paper first, and then slowly practice them. In fact, Subai didn't know that Su Fuegui himself was dead long ago, because Su Fuegui once gave Subai no less impression and shock than Liqi. After all, he was a figure of the same era as Su Yuhang. After becoming an audience, after living for so long, no matter what, Su Fuegui was really good to Subai. As the son of an enemy, Su Fuegui had no intention of protecting Subai when he forced him to stay at the place of enlightenment. Later, the inheritance on the tombstone gave Subai the most suitable and most needed one. When Subai started refining his soul, taking this as the center of the circle, a spiritual shock began to spread out. Refining his soul requires the word refining, just like taking a piece of iron and reforging it. Naturally, there is no need for much hardship and pain. Word. This is also because real congenital zombies have no souls. They are another form of life transformed from the corpse of a person after death, and the soul of the real owner of the corpse either disappears or goes to hell to be reincarnated after death. It is precisely for this reason that zombies are not invisible and are hated by gods and gods. Because humans have souls, immortals have gods, everyone operates according to a certain rule, and zombies have become an alien under this big rule. Not only humans and gods hate zombies, but even heaven will punish zombies. Because they are immortal, just like cancer cells, once the number of zombies is not controlled, they will inevitably overturn the world in the future. It is precisely because of the powerful force of this joint suppression by humans, gods, and heaven that zombies have always been a rare group and cannot reach a real scale. As for the listeners, they are transformed from ordinary people, and coupled with the characteristics of radio, no matter how injured you are, as long as you can be judged to be alive and leave the story world, you will be completely repaired, plus other for some reasons, listeners can redeem zombie bloodlines and enhance zombie bloodlines, but they can never become real zombies. Because you have a soul, zombie blood is just an ability and a means for you. Your life essence is actually a creature like a human or a god, not an original zombie. Ancient zombie second turn soul refining is to reforge the soul, perform a new kind of refining of the soul, abandon the functions similar to the soul, and completely follow the constitution of the zombie to reintegrate it. Sufugui is based on the Qin dynasty more than 2,000 years ago. A new method created by the military body training method, by stealing the sky and exchanging the sun, the gods will mistake you as a zombie, so that the rules of this world will recognize you as a complete zombie, thereby achieving complete suicide. Gain the immortality that truly belongs to zombies in the 5 elements. At the moment, the body that Subai had just acquired was making a crunching sound. The muscles and bones of the body, including the muscles and bones of the face, were constantly changing. The reorganization and forging of the soul was producing an accelerated process. The butterfly effect thus naturally involves physical changes. And this change is making the appearance of the dead young man continue to resemble that of Subai. It's a pity that the young man's height is shorter than Subai's, and his frame is also much smaller than Subai's. Therefore, it is impossible for him to become exactly the same as Subai in the end, at least in terms of height. Unless Subai is now to devour flesh and blood to provide energy for his body's transformation, but now Subai didn't care at all whether he would become a smaller version of himself again. All his thoughts were immersed in the process of the second transformation of the ancient zombie. Since he first entered the story world, Subai had discussed some things with Fatty. For example, in this damn story world where everyone has become ordinary people, it seems that everyone's path to improvement has been completely blocked, but now it seems, if the choice of the two of them is not a bug, it is probably a dark light deliberately left by the broadcast. Lychee said that he would try his best to make the train start again, which means that Lychee has the ability, or that the world that is about to be conquered over there still has the ability to do some things. Maybe while the broadcast is playing around with consumption, it also I will make some preparations. Of course, Subai didn't know what the specific meaning of radio was, and he was not like Su Yuhang who could play like brothers with radio. This soul belongs to him, an original and unpolluted soul. At any time, as long as the listener has received enhancement, his soul will not be pure. Subai didn't know how Sufugui performed the second transformation of the ancient zombie. But in Subai's own opinion, without the background of the story world as a basis and use, he probably would not be able to find the opportunity for the second transformation of the ancient zombie. Back then, under such good conditions by Huang Quan, the place of enlightenment, he only completed the first turn of the ancient zombie because he felt that the second turn of the ancient zombie was really too difficult. If he hadn't seen Sufugui's power with his own eyes, it would be very difficult. Maybe you think that the second turn of the ancient zombie is just imaginary nonsense, just like a perpetual motion machine. When the second transformation of Gu Zheng entered the final stage, the tombstone belonging to Sufugui and the shadow of the coffin appeared in Subai's mind. Immediately, these shadows were slowly fading, and Subai's body was full of shadows. Then it began to make a series of crisp sounds. When it stood up, a feeling that the soul was too powerful and wanted to explode came over him. The green color on his skin was so rich that it almost turned into water droplets, and the evil aura on his body was almost solid, especially the purple in his eyes, which was so strong that it seemed to burn the souls of others. Taking a deep breath, Subai began to calm down the restlessness in his soul. Slowly, the purple in his eyes began to fade away, and the blue color of his skin returned to normal. This body became another's. In appearance, he was just a little shorter, but in terms of feeling, he did feel less awkward than when he first possessed him. Subai was looking forward to it. After he left the story world and regained his own strength, the two would be superimposed. How much can your strength increase? It is inevitable to at least break through to the entry level of advanced listeners. At this time, a big yellow dog suddenly rushed into the house and started barking at Subai. Daikai, I have use for the corpses here, but I can't let you, a stupid dog, eat them. Subai kicked him over. The big yellow dog was kicked out by Subai and landed outside the door. But the big yellow dog seemed to be irritated, and began to bark, bark, bark at Subai again. Subai walked over, grabbed the big yellow dog by its tail and lifted it up. The corpses here are not something you, a beast, can touch. There was a kind of anger and humiliation in the eyes of the big yellow dog. MMP, I know your brother is really a bitch, just pretend it, if you don't believe me, you can't recognize me, if you really treat me like a dog and just kicked me, Fatty will definitely die. You just deliberately reserved your strength to retaliate wantonly. The day before yesterday, when Subai was almost unconscious when he was fighting with the cap, Fatty also deliberately came over and slapped Subai wildly in the face in an attempt to wake Subai up. Now it can only be regarded as a turn of events. Subai's tense face showed a smile. He held the big yellow dog's tail and looked down, and then said with some disappointment, "It's actually a male. It would be great if it was a female. By the way, do you think there are any dogs with special tastes?" When the big yellow dog heard this, he seemed to be shocked with electric shock. Woof 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 woof. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 908. Subai transported the corpses of the audience to the woods one after another. The next step was to cut the meat and pickle it, which was a waste of time and process. Originally, Subai thought that Fatty could help with this, but now Fatty has become a big yellow dog. Then Subai has no choice but to be lazy and can only do it himself. The previous wine bottle was placed by Subai at a location by the river. Now it was taken and 6 eyeballs were put into it. The completion degree of this task changed from 1/2 to 2/2. It was considered completed. As for a lot of meat has been processed. There is still a jar of meat that Fatty has cured before in the wall of the old house. When the time comes, we will bring it over to find a villager to buy and sell it, and the mission will be fooled. It is not too difficult for a villager's family to come up with 10,000 yuan. If it still shows that there is not enough meat in the end, then just wait for death. Anyway, Subai and Fatty are not their own bodies now, so there will be no situation where one can survive. Sometimes, it is actually quite satisfying to die together and live together, eliminating internal divisions and arguments. Dabai, you are so awesome. You can actually cut off your own meat and sprinkle it with salt to marinate. The fat man crawled beside Subai and talked to Subai in a way similar to spiritual communication. Otherwise, he would just it can bark woof, woof, woof. Here Subai threw a piece of meat in front of the fat man. The fat man put his nose up to sniff it and said, "Which part of the meat is this?" "Your baby," Subai replied. "Why is it so shrunken that you don't even recognize it?" "Damn it, Bimax, how can you be so perverted?" "Okay, the meat has been marinated. I'll hide it here first. There's another jar in the house. I'll go get it now and find someone to sell it to. Our mission is complete." Subai dropped the knife and squatted down. "Wash your hands by the stream. You are a complete zombie. If you have blood on your hands, shouldn't you just lick it off with your tongue and wash your hands?" "I'm willing." "Okay." After washing his hands, Subai stood up, looked up and looked around, and said with some surprise, "Why hasn't Baivuchain come here yet? Your hands are itchy and you want to be the Monkey King." "I think I'm more like Erlang Shen." "Okay, Fatty, I'm miserable enough now. If you are a friend, you should pay more attention to me. After I leave this story world, I will tell the monks and ask everyone to pay more attention to you. Fatty. Fat man, take a look here, I'll get the meat. Be careful, don't be too confident. Black and white are not that easy to deal with, Fatty reminded. I know. Sudbai waved his hand and disappeared deep into the forest. The fat man found a pile of fallen leaves to lie down, but he also felt that it was a bit boring just lying there. The most important thing was that the fat man disliked the dog smell on his body, but he was too embarrassed to ask Sudbai to use soap or something. He takes a shower. Sudbai got a good opportunity this time. With the unique conditions here, he should have made a breakthrough. Even if Sudbai didn't elaborate, the fat man knew in his heart that as long as he returned to the real world to recover his strength, Sudbai would be stronger again. Moving up a floor is definitely a sure thing. Nowadays, everyone is racing against time, and those who run slowly will die. Fatty is not jealous in his heart. That is a lie. Today is different from the past. In the past, I could tolerate you being stronger than me for the time being. Anyway, we have a good relationship. But now, in addition to the internal competition between myself and others, there is also competition with the entire environment. Natural selection of the fittest, survival of the fittest. In the audience circle instantly became extremely naked. He stretched out his dog's paws and looked at it. He had shown the palm prints to many people before, but this was the first time he could see the dog's paw prints so clearly. The fat man turned over and sat up, with the two front paws close to his belly and the two paws start alternating positions. It was an unintentional move at first, but after a set of tricks was played, Fatty actually sensed a weak energy fluctuation. Suddenly, the fat man was stunned for a moment, and then he seemed a little excited. He immediately started again and did it again. This time he was more focused and attentive than before. Then, very clear energy fluctuations came. Is it really okay? Fatty's heart was filled with huge waves at this moment. In fact, just as Sudbai became a ghost and he also became a ghost, the restrictions on everyone have actually disappeared. Now that you are in the state of a ghost, you can naturally use some abilities that are different from ordinary people. But this time the fat man used a dog's paw to pinch out the trick, and it was actually successful. The fat man in the past would not have been able to do this experiment, and he never expected that this situation would actually happen. This is not a demon cultivator. Fatty knows clearly that he is not a demon now. The real reason why he can use his dog paws to seal the secret is because he sees himself as a human being. Even if this body is a dog now, even if he is just a soul that has just been summoned. But as long as he treats himself as a human being, he can still pull out Taoist tricks. For a moment, the fat man had a serious dog face and his two paws were touching each other up and down, as if he was meditating. Of all things, human beings are the most valuable. Human beings can make the form without incident, the spirit without body, and achieve the meaning of inaction with tranquility, which is the same as the Tao. People often lose the Tao, and those who are not Tao lose people. People often go to rebirth, not rebirth to people. Therefore, those who maintain health should be careful not to lose track of their health. Those who follow the Tao must be careful not to lose life, so that the Tao and life can be kept together, and life and the Tao can be protected. The fat man recited the scripture silently in his heart. This scene looks a little funny, but it also gives people an extremely serious feeling. And slowly, a Taoist figure sitting cross-legged appeared beside the big tree behind the fat man. The Taoist man was wearing a light blue Taoist robe and looked a little elegant. It would be better if he could be a little thinner. But it is precisely because of this kind of fatness that it carries a true meaning that seems to see through the world and the world of animals. The world is unkind and regards all things as stupid dogs. People are proud and think that they stand at the top of the spirit of all things. The ascetics are the proudest among the proud people. Rather than obtaining that trivial and ridiculous sense of satisfaction, they want to compare their height with the sky, and with their own destiny, who is in control of whom. Cultivating the Tao is also cultivating people. The big yellow dog just kept sitting there cross-legged, as if sinking into a state of selflessness and enlightenment. Squeak. Opening the door, it was unlocked, and there was another person sitting inside. The old man was sitting on the chair in the living room, just like when Subai and the fat man came back from the village entrance a few days ago. But their identities have actually been completely overturned. "You're back," the old man said weakly. Subai closed the door and said helplessly, "I didn't expect you to be so persistent." "Of course I'm very persistent." A pale smile appeared on the old man's face. "You should know this sentence, the dead are the most important, so among the dead, the ghosts are the most honorable. I was injured by you today. Face, if word spreads in the future, who will fear the laws of the underworld anymore? I feel that the ground is the same as the ground." "It feels almost the same." Subai pointed at the old man and said, "What's wrong with him? He should belong to the monks and is not under your control. He was attracting ghosts, and I encountered him when his energy and blood were weak. Moreover, his lifespan has expired. He relies on magic to replenish the souls of his direct relatives to survive. I have captured his soul and will take it back to the underworld with you to be punished. I have a physical body now, I am a zombie now." Subai pointed at himself, and then said, "Logically speaking, you have no right to control me." "You are a dead soul," Baivuchain said, "when I see you, you are a dead soul. But I am a zombie now, a real zombie." "I don't believe you can't feel it," Subai reminded. "If you touch me, it should be against the rules of the underworld. Rules are dead, and so are people. It's only natural that a dead man touches a dead man's rules." Baivuchain's figure walked out of the old man's body. The old man lay directly on the ground quietly, and Baivuchain appeared directly in front of Subai. In front of him, this time, the soul-calling bell and the morning stick were sacrificed together. Obviously, after suffering a loss in Subai's hands last time, Baivuchain was much more serious when facing Subai this time, and he really regarded Subai as an opponent. Subai immediately stretched out his hand, grabbed the morning stick with one hand and rapped the soul-calling bell with the other. In an instant, white smoke began to rise from Subai's hands, as if sulfuric acid had been thrown on it, but the corpse aura and evil aura on Subai's body keep pushing against it to start a stalemate and cancel it out. Baivuchain's face showed a look of surprise, because this time he was sure that Subai had really turned into a zombie, but he did not stop his offensive, but continued. "Little guy, are you from Longhu Mountain or Mission? If you practice evil by yourself, aren't you afraid of humiliating your ancestors?" Obviously, Baivuchain regarded Subai as a highly cultivated being who fell into the zombie way in his own way. Nowadays, the way of Taoism in the human world has withered away, and only some true traditions still remain in Longhu Mountain and Mission. He. Subai smiled, turned his palms down, forced down the morning stick and the soul-calling bell, then opened his hands and shouted. Ice. In an instant, a layer of frost froze the entire living room, and even Baivuchain's clothes were covered in ice scum. There are some methods, faced with the cold air that was so terrifying that it seemed as if even the soul could be frozen, Baivuchain had to temporarily avoid the edge, call back the soul-calling bell and morning stick, and retreat for a while. A mocking smile appeared at the corner of Subai's mouth. "This is where I am. My current strength is less than 10% of my true strength." Baivuchain thought that Subai was insulting him, and immediately scolded. "Zuzi, you are arrogant." Next moment, the high-crowned hat on Baivuchain's head rose up, and a string of Buddhist sounds faintly flowed from all around. A stream of Buddhist characters rolled down and hit Subai directly in front of him. Subai blocked with both hands, but still couldn't stop the magnificent Dharma. his whole body was knocked out of the wall and flew backwards, hitting the ground hard. This is the Buddha's order given to me by Ksatagarbha Bodhisattva. The pillar is nothing more than an evil spirit. How dare you be so arrogant? Sudbai staggered to his feet, his body covered in scars, but his face still showed an excited and belligerent look. Are you Tinker Bell or Baivachain? Such treasures come one after another. It just so happens that a friend of mine is also a monk. I took this thing and gave it to him. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 909. Fatty had reminded Sudbai many times that black and white are not that simple. Although he is an NPC character designed by radio in this story world, he has to admit that there are some NPC characters who sometimes act more real than real listeners. For example, Sudbai has experienced the devil in the painting and the black convenience store owner, including the old pope. Of course, compared with the above, this Baivachain is really a bit unattractive, but he is not an easy character to get along with. The most important thing is that the upper limit of this kind of NPC is not like the audience, which you can roughly estimate. Their strength depends on the design of the broadcast and has something to do with their own conditions. It's just that Sudbai has been suppressed for a long time and has become an ordinary person for so long. Everyone played with the most primitive swords and guns and was frustrated when his head was shot at the muzzle of a pistol. Now, although his strength is far from the level of recovery. What Sudbai just said is less than 10% is true, but even less than 10% of the zombie power is enough for Sudbai to evolve many unique methods of his own, and the previous ice power is also one of them, and now, Sudbai was really impatient. After a quick fight, and by the way, I masturbated Baivachain, who is as precious as Tinker Bell, and this time the story world was not in vain. The Buddhist order on Baivachain's head was inherited from Ksatagarbha Bodhisattva, the one who once made the great wish, I will never become a Buddha until hell is empty. His state was extremely restrained. After being caught off guard, Sudbai's zombie body was greatly shaken. A few more blows might destroy the zombie body that he had just condensed. However, Sudbai did not think that Baivachain could use this top-quality Buddhist magical weapon flawlessly. After all, Baivachain himself was also a ghost. Facts also proved Sudbai's guess. After using the Buddhist order to repel Sudbai, Baivachain did not choose to continue to take advantage of the situation to attack. Instead, he held up the Buddhist order and continued to verbally attack Sudbai. Zuzadared and Gan is unbridled, evil, filthy, and other adjectives keep coming at him. This only shows that using Buddhist orders is not an easy task for Baivachain. It seems that you also need a long CD time. Sudbai's figure slowly lowered down, and then he flew up and rushed towards Baivachain. A ray of Buddha light appeared from the Buddha's order and enveloped Baivachain. At the same time, the guardian of the morning stick automatically rushed over and smashed it down on Sudbai. Sudbai quickly turned sideways, then reached out to grab the morning stick, and then stopped. Body shape, hands constantly changing positions, swinging the morning stick, trying to remove the potential energy from its body to the greatest extent, and finally piercing the morning stick directly into the ground. Sudbai's palm began to continuously release the zombie evil spirit to corrode the morning stick. This was to turn his magic weapon against the guest in front of Baivachain. Baivachain's expression remained unchanged. Although he could feel that his morning stick was gradually losing contact with him, most of his mind still fell on the Buddhist order above his head. Zombies have no souls, so many of Baivachain's methods for dealing with ghosts are difficult to use against Sudbai in front of him. Therefore, he can only rely on this Buddhist order to kill Sudbai. Finally, Baivachain regained his strength, and the Buddha's order above his head once again bloomed with brilliance, turning into a cage of Buddha's light, covering the surrounding areas. Sudbai struck with one hand, and the morning stick that had wiped Baivachain's consciousness completely fell into his hand. Immediately afterwards, Sudbai's figure quickly retreated. Although the surrounding Buddha light kept squeezing it, everything was still in Sudbai's hands. Within the endurance range, zombies are the carriers of immortality. Although Sudbai is not strong at this time, under the stimulation of the second-level ancient zombie, his zombie realm is actually not low. You can't kill me like this. Sudbai looked calmly at Baivachain, who was still activating the Buddha's light. I'm also curious how long you can hold on. A sneer appeared on Baivachain's pale face that had not changed for thousands of years, and he continued to activate the Buddha's light without moving like a mountain. But behind Sudbai, a black light suddenly appeared, and a guy wearing the same style as Baivachain but completely black appeared. Shape, a chain glowing with purple light was thrown out and wrapped directly around Sudbai's neck. And what about me? Another one coming? Are you playing tadpole to find your mother? Why don't you move Ksadagarba Bodhisattva out? The morning stick in Sudbai's hand stirred and entangled the chains, but when he was about to break free, the Buddha's light suddenly surged around him, forcibly suppressing the evil spirit of the zombies that Sudbai had just released, and the iron chains restrained Sudbai even more. Close. With a clang, the morning stick in Sudbai's hand fell to the ground, and a black figure appeared in front of Sudbai, with a black finger directly touching Sudbai's eyebrows. Disaster. Die. Wailing. Countless nightmare scenes belonging to the underworld began to appear in Sudbai's mind, but there was no fear or panic in Sudbai's eyes. You must know that Sudbai's tenacity is so tough that even broadcasting sometimes deliberately sets up traps. What impact will it have on Sudbai, let alone these NPCs? There was a look of surprise on Baivachain's face, and his expression was almost the same as Baivachain's. Seeing this scene, Sudbai seemed to have thought of something, and immediately closed his eyes tightly, and then let out a low growl in his throat. Buzz. The surrounding Buddha's light dissipated instantly, and Baivachain also disappeared. The iron chain that locked him before disappeared. In the same place, he and Baivachain, who was holding the Buddha's order, were still the only ones. This kind of illusion has little effect on me. Sudbai shook his shoulders, reached out and picked up the morning stick again. The brilliance of the Buddha ling was much weaker than before, and it seemed that it could not be used continuously for a short period of time. Baivachain put the Buddha ling away, his face looking ugly. According to the rules of the underworld, human monks, demons, and other existences do not fall under the jurisdiction of ghosts. They only target ghosts that become pure ghosts after death. Therefore, Su, who is now a zombie with a physical body, for Baivachain, there is really a feeling that there is no way to start. Shizu, I will fight with you today. Baivachain's tongue stuck out at this time, and the surroundings suddenly became ghostly. A dark door appeared next to Baivachain, and then, there was a sound coming from inside the door. There was a terrifying roar. This is because I can't beat him and I plan to call helpers from the underworld. Sudbai's face suddenly became solemn. He had tasted the power of this summoning technique. Hills had also used this technique to deal with him, but the demon summoned by Hills was bribed by him. But Sudbai didn't think he could follow suit this time. After all, Baivachain had a noble status and was considered an official in the underworld. The helpers he summoned from the underworld could not be bribed by him again. The most important thing was the thing is, in your current state, even if you sacrifice all your blood and essence, others may not look down on you. Woof woof woof. A dog barked. Baivachain followed the sound, and he instinctively realized that the dog barking like this was definitely not an ordinary thing. Sudbai was also a little surprised. Why did the fat guy run out? Could it be that he took the initiative to help? A yellow figure, oh no, it was the shadow of a dog, suddenly appeared and rushed towards the door that Baivachain had just summoned. Beast, how dare you! Baivachain immediately used the soul summoning bell to hit the big yellow dog. But the big yellow dog dodged in a flash, and then the dog's paws directly stuck to the door. A shadow of a fat Taoist priest wearing a Taoist robe appeared behind the yellow dog. The underworld is in order, creation is constant, yin and yang rotate, and each performs his or her duties. Heaven and earth are majestic, and they are in control of themselves. Now my disciples are reporting from the human world to seek enlightenment, and heaven is listening. The fat Taoist priest's phantom raised his finger to the sky, and a blue light rushed upward. Bai Vuchain was immediately frightened to death. Of course he knew what Fatty was doing. He was specifically reporting to heaven. The ghost he summoned had not yet appeared, but its aura had already descended into the world. This was not allowed by heaven. Thing. Sudbai looked on in a daze. It was ridiculous and surprising for Fatty to possess a dog, but now this dog can actually channel spirits and even use Taoism. It is estimated that even the classic of mountains and seas, the stories are not that exaggerated. A group of dark clouds immediately appeared in the sky, and there was a faint flash of electric light in the dark clouds. Bai Vuchain glared at Sudbai and the jumping big yellow dog angrily, then turned around and walked into the door on his own initiative. The roar inside the door began to decrease and gradually disappeared, and finally even the door began to turn into nothingness. It completely dissipated. Ha ha ha, in front of the majestic heaven, a little ghost from the underworld can only give in. The fat man smiled happily and kept shouting woof woof woof. Do you also have a chance? Sudbai asked. That's right, let's follow the prince to get some glory. It's good. You really look like my bitch now. Fatty said, damn it, can you still talk properly? Is it easy for Fatty to run out and help you fight after he has turned into a dog? It's a pity. I originally wanted to snatch the piece of Buddha's ring and give it to the monk, but now I just got a stick. Come on, our main storyline is now over, and we only need one last tremor. If we keep messing with it, there will definitely be problems. Believe it or not, you can snatch the Buddha's order and Ksatagarbha Bodhisattva will do it later. I have to come to you to settle accounts, and then pull out the carrot and lead me out of the pit, and all the gods and Buddhas in the sky will come out. By the way, why haven't the dark clouds above our heads dispersed yet? Is it going to rain? Sudbai pointed to the sky and asked. The big yellow dog looked up at the sky, then its forelegs immediately trembled a few times, and then woof 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 woof. Communicate with your soul, Sudbai reminded. Dabai, run away. Bai Vuchain took the door and left. But because I snitched to Tiandeo and told Tiandeo that there was a situation here, Tiandeo's eyes swept over this place. Found you. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 910. Dabai, run away quickly. I'll find a way to take out the pot of meat sealed at home. Don't stand next to the house. What if the house is bombed? The fat man urged Sudbai. Sudbai really had the urge to grab the fat man's tail, hang him up and whip him with a belt, but now the thunderclouds in the sky seemed to have locked onto him, and the sense of crisis was almost completely filling his heart. Sudbai had no choice but to grit his teeth and run to the other side, that is, to the other side of the river. In this place, it is impossible to avoid the thunderstorm, because the village has not yet broken the isolation. At the same time, even if the isolation is broken, you have to find a formation or barrier that is enough to deceive the superiors and subordinates, but Fatty, the current situation obviously belongs to the category of kill but not bury. If he had the ability to do this now, he would not let himself run as far as he wanted. As soon as you arrived at the river, the first thunder struck you very quickly. To be specific, it barely gave you any time to react before the thunder struck you. Sudbai didn't know if he could avoid this thunder if he was in his prime, but at least now, he really could only be passively beaten. When thunder and lightning struck his body, Sudbai instantly lost the feeling of his limbs. He knelt on the ground and swayed with an inertial support to prevent him from falling directly into the muddy beach. A stream of black energy came from him. Emitted from the body, this is the zombie evil spirit and corpse energy in his body, which can also be regarded as his own origin. At the same time, his soul has become strange because it has been forged by the second level of ancient zombie. It is completely contrary to the monk's soul. Therefore, in the lightning strike, his soul was also severely damaged. In short, in this sudden moment, Subai was struck unconscious, his whole body was paralyzed, his soul fell into stasis, and he lost all perception of the outside world in an instant. Damn it, if this time he was struck by lightning because he was tricked by the fat man, that would be really unfair. Subai's consciousness began to close itself. In other words, Subai was still able to think for himself. He seemed to be in an environment surrounded by darkness. He had no idea what was happening outside or what was about to happen. Once he is struck to death by the tribulation thunder, perhaps this part of his consciousness will also dissipate. Loneliness often brings despair, and despair is also inseparable from loneliness. This is how Subai feels now. This feeling makes him somewhat familiar, as if he has returned to his time in the petri dish. Helpless, lonely, and not knowing when the end will be. Gradually, Subai felt that his consciousness was getting weaker and weaker, and he could no longer even think deeply. This meant that his body and soul were on the verge of collapse, and he was probably only half a step away from collapse. Go into complete silence. When things came to a close, there was no reluctance nor much anger. After all, Subai believed that Fatty didn't deliberately trick him. He could only say that after he turned into a dog, he found that he could also use spells and raised his tail directly to the sky to face black and white. Impermanence came directly to lead the thunder. A person without hatred, venting without a goal, Subai seemed very calm before his death. Of course, when you can't even think deeply, apart from meaningless hysteria, you just calmly wait for the end. Are you going to die? A voice came from behind him. In the vast darkness all around, a voice suddenly came, which surprised Subai because this was the last hiding place of his consciousness. When his soul and body were completely on the verge of collapse, his consciousness could only curl up in a corner, quietly waiting for the final verdict. It can be said that this is your last private place, which is what the saying goes, deep in your heart. Subai turned around. Behind him, there was nothing but darkness. He couldn't find anyone to talk to. Subai was already wondering if he was suffering from delusion. Before his soul was about to die, his consciousness began to fall apart. Other selves emerge. Are you really going to die? The voice appeared again, and immediately, Subai saw a grey-white light shining in the darkness in front of him, and a figure was coming from there, and it became clearer and clearer. This person actually looks exactly like me. Is it you? Subai frowned slightly. He didn't know that he still lived in the depths of his soul. Wasn't he already killed by himself, the one who had been placed in the bronze box? I'm dead, the other party said very calmly, but I don't know why I appeared again. In fact, it should be impossible for me to appear again, because my people have been killed by you, and you also received all my memories. What's yours, what's mine, what's ours, now belongs to you alone. The other party just stood in front of Subai, looking at Subai carefully. I know what the reason is, Subai said. Indeed, when this guy appeared deep in his heart, Subai kept thinking about why the situation happened. After all, in the beginning, Suyuhang had been cleared out by him. How could this guy continue to hide deep in his soul without letting himself discover it? The reason is that in this story world, the souls of myself and the fat man have been reset to the state they were in before they became listeners. Therefore, if they are summoned after their death, they can directly become ghosts. So, that is to say, he appears in his life again, at least in this state, he still exists. I'm very surprised the other party seemed to be making a joke or meeting old friends. Have you ever experienced eternal silence? I think I'm almost there, Subai replied. I have experienced it, the other person seemed to be asking and answering himself. I was killed by you, my life was ended by you, and finally my memory was fused by you. You used my body, and my memory became your memory. When I disappear, it is equivalent to not existing in this world at all. Listening to what you said, I think you are quite pitiful. Subai didn't expect that before he died, he could still chat with this guy who resurrected from the dead. Of course, Subai also knew that people can't be resurrected after death, but in order to make it realistic, the broadcaster cloned him, but the broadcaster will basically restore this guy's personality and emotions according to his deduction. Just like when I was a child, I saw you flying around the house helplessly. The other party suddenly said this. Subai's eyes suddenly condensed at this moment. Obviously, this was Subai's reverse scale. Why, are you angry? The other party smiled. You were very pitiful back then. You wanted to go to your parents, but you couldn't enter their room. You wanted to come to me, but I didn't want to play with you. I thought you are ugly and dirty, a deadbeat who stays in my house and refuses to leave. You didn't know what hatred was at that time, because I had scolded you many times, and you didn't know how many times you were hurt by bullets for breaking into the restricted area of the house. But you really didn't have hatred at that time, you were only very pure and unique. A feeling of. That's when you are lonely. You want to find someone to play with, but no one wants to pay attention to you. You just keep trying again and again. The servants at home can't see you. The only people you can find are me and Dad. Mom, but we don't want to talk to you. You come again and again, leave again and then do it again and again, like a poor fool. A poor ghost who was burned clean by a cannon when he was born, leaving only a brittle soul. Now he actually knows how angry he feels when the past is mentioned. Subai then smiled and said, you can perform to your heart's content. I'm different from you. I have parents. The other party seemed determined to continue to rub salt into Subai's heart. A parent who locked you in a box for more than 10 years and then watched you being killed by me, Subai shot back. But I have a childhood, unlike someone else whose childhood is completely fake, created by a painting. I really don't want this kind of childhood. In fact, I really don't envy you. I have been used as a tool by them from the beginning. I don't care. I only hate you from beginning to end. And you, because of your past real childhood, so when you discover the truth in the end, you must be more miserable than me. I said that, right? I love them, I love my father, and I love my mother, the other party said very affectionately, and then looked at Subai with a serious look and said, this is really love. I thank them for everything they have given me. My childhood, my name, includes, my life. Although all this has now become yours, I am still grateful for what I had. You are very ill. Ha, maybe. The other person squatted down, raised his head, and looked at Subai, who was still standing. He stretched out his hand and pointed downward. I'm very lonely down there. Subai knew clearly that what the other party said down there was not the underworld and underworld, but the loneliness after life withered. I'm going to accompany you soon, Subai said. No, I hate you. There was a hint of ridicule in the corner of the other party's mouth. You are a poor kid. I didn't care to talk to you before, and I don't care to talk to you now. Then what do you want? I want you to send your father and mother down together and accompany me so that our real family of 3 can reunite underground. The other party stood up again, reached out and patted Subai's shoulder, put his mouth to Subai's ear, and repeated. Promise me, okay. After saying that, the other party began to slowly retreat, and his figure began to slowly disappear. Thunder tribulation will not stop until it kills the target, but you and I share the same soul. If my consciousness is destroyed by thunder tribulation, lay tribulation will think that the task is completed and disappear. I know that I am already dead. This is not the real me. Your last reversal is really. I don't want you to be moved. Remember, you and I have the same name, Subai. Since our parents have combined the two of us into one person, then there must be a son to accompany them and a son to be responsible for finding them. You say. Right? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 911. You are so right that I can't refute it. Subai just watched the guy in front of him who looked exactly like him slowly fade away. How should I put it, this feeling was a bit unreal, because Subai really didn't expect that the scene would happen between him and himself. Could it be that, can people really think clearly after death? If he hadn't provoked him again and again when he was alive, would he have killed him in the end? It seemed that I would still kill him. After all, only one of him and I could survive. If the other one was still alive, there would always be a sense of threat and great insecurity. In fact, Subai himself knew that the other party was actually dead a long time ago, but for some reason, he really felt that the other party was completely dead now. It's like a thorn stuck in the heart. In the past, I just broke it off, but this time, it took the initiative to come out. From then on, the two people, the two Subai, will completely become one person. I'm the only one left. Of course, Subai was not so pretentious that he felt lonely, nor was he sentimental enough to feel reluctant to let go of this guy. However, this matter ended in such a way, and it seemed to be a kind of final ending. Good cause and effect comes to an end. In a certain sense, you and him are much closer than twins. After all, the twins just look alike, but you and him have shared a body and a memory. Between each other, you have, although we broke up in the end, no one can erase some facts and experiences. I was a ghost back then. After. I am a human and you become a ghost. We all come from the same parents. The most fake reality you have ever experienced. I have tasted the most real falsehood. Two living people, forcibly made one by that couple, and even when we were killing each other, she was sitting next to her drinking her own red wine. Don't worry, I'll let them go down, to accompany you. When the other party's figure completely disappeared, Subai murmured the sentence. This is what he has to do, and it's not a question of whether he can help or not. However, in order to show respect at this time, it's better to confirm. Then, Subai felt that the surrounding darkness dissipated in an instant, and his consciousness finally spread out. The dazzling light brought with it a sense of dizziness, and Subai felt a headache, accompanied by an extremely strong feeling of nausea. Gradually, Subai began to adapt to this feeling, and then realized that the thing that caused his discomfort was actually a light bulb. Are you awake? A big yellow dog crawled beside the bed. Subai wanted to speak, but found it difficult to make a sound. What came with him after waking up was not the joy of surviving the disaster, but the pain of tearing apart the body and soul. This feeling was life-changing. There is a feeling that it is better to remain in a coma. I'll stop talking if I can't. Your body and soul were severely damaged. The last thunder almost destroyed your body and mine. The big yellow dog jumped on the bed and looked at Subai so close. Look at me. Subai saw that the big yellow dog was also covered in injuries. In some places, the bones were exposed, and there were still traces of burns. Don't be moved. I dug the hole myself. I have to bear 2 thunderbolts for you. But when the last thunderstorm came down, I was actually hesitant. I guess I won't help you block the last thunderbolt. Fatty, I'm not that sacrificial for myself or others, but the last thunder dissipated with heavy thunder and small raindrops. What's going on? The big yellow dog stretched out its paw and patted Subai's face. Now Subai couldn't move at all and couldn't even speak. He could only be bullied by the dog. Seeing a hint of sullenness flashing through Subai's eyes, the big yellow dog seemed to have let go of something on his mind, It seems you are still understanding, Fatty. I felt a consciousness dissipate in your body at the last moment. I wasn't sure about you just now. Is the consciousness retained in the body now yours? Now Fatty is sure that it is you. Hee, if it weren't for you, Fatty would have killed you right now. My Dabai is dead. I can't let someone pretend to be inexplicable. Can you survive if the goods occupy your body? Sudbai closed his eyes, obviously too lazy to talk nonsense with this dog anymore, and he couldn't move, speak, or communicate. As for the fat man who said he had to bear two thunders, even if he didn't look at the fat man, Sudbai believed the current injuries on his body. It was not unusual for a fat guy to do such a thing. Of course, as for whether the fat man would die on his behalf because of guilt, Sudbai was too lazy to think about it. Although all this was caused by the fat man's pretense, as friends, if you think about something too deeply, there is no need to be friends anymore. In fact, because of the fact that his other self died on his behalf, Sudbai didn't hate Fatty very much now. He seemed to have taken a dim view of many things at once, and he felt quite calm and relaxed. You don't have to worry about the mission. Fatty, I gave a hardware store owner a dream for 3 nights. Well, you were also in a coma for 3 nights. I guess that guy will have to do what I said in my dream tonight. As I said, I took 10,000 yuan and came to the woods to get the meat myself, and then kept the money. In this case, it would only be a matter of time before the task was completed. It is now 8 o'clock in the evening, and we can leave in about 3 or 4 hours. The fat man was still talking to himself. After a while, the fat man saw that Sudbai didn't respond and didn't even open his eyelids. He didn't have the self-consciousness that others were too lazy to pay attention to. Instead, he looked a little excited and said, Dabai, look at you now. It's just that your soul and body were completely paralyzed by lightning, but your body is fine. It is estimated that the previous lightning was offset by the zombie aura in your body. Now your appearance much better than me. Compare me to a dog. Sudbai thought in his heart, everyone should be much better than you. What about that, Dabai? I know you don't have some indifference habit in that area. How about Fatty help you break it? Although Fatty is a little miserable now, his Taoism has recovered a lot. I'm going to help you right away. You hypnotized the old ant at the head of the village into a dream and asked her to come here and be a bully? Let's fight fire with fire. Maybe you will be normal in the future? Hey, the more you think about it, the more feasible it becomes. When you see a woman in the future, your mind will become, I have slept with that old woman, so what does this one mean? Then you can feel normal again. The fat man became more excited and excited as he talked, and the dog's tail kept wagging. In fact, the fat man's inner monologue. Damn it, why did you keep teasing me about the black crematorium? Fatty took this opportunity to make a piece of black history for you. After saying that, the fat man jumped out of bed and actually went out to find the old ant. Sudbai didn't take care of this guy. Of course, he couldn't take care of him now even if he wanted to. He was now a paralyzed vegetative state. Except for the movement of his eyes, he couldn't do anything else. Sudbai seemed to have fallen asleep again for a while. When the sound of opening the door came from outside, Sudbai opened his eyes again, and then he saw the fat man jumping on the bed again, with a serious face. Huh, so dangerous. Sudbai was really worried that this guy would bring back an old ant for him. Dabai, the situation is serious. The seal of the village will be released soon, Fatty said. What kind of big deal is this? When I just ran out to find your old ant, guess what I found? The statues of gods in the living rooms of the houses next door started to glow on their own. Damn it! Fatty, I have never seen so many gods and Buddhas appear in my life. It makes me numb. Of course, ordinary people can't see it, but the fat man feels very clearly that these Buddha statues are shining, which means that there are many gods and Buddhas gathered outside the village. The Baiva chain from before can come in for some reason, or maybe those gods and Buddhas are different from Baiva chain. They have their own taboos and worries, but if tonight the guy doesn't take the money and take the meat as I said in the dream, and the village will be unblocked around tomorrow, we will be in trouble. I have resigned myself to becoming an animal. I am a shame among monks. You are also an evil zombie. If the gods and Buddhas from outside come in, we will be the first to be destroyed. Damn it, why is the energy level of this story world getting higher and higher? Taller. That's because the task could have been completed faster. You were lazy and only asked one person to entrust the dream. If you arranged several people to entrust the dream every day and asked them to send someone to take the money and take the meat early, the matter would have been settled long ago. This is our drag pace. Broadcasting in Storyland is not satisfied with us anymore. Of course, Subai could only say these words in his heart. He couldn't speak them now, but he felt that the fat man should be able to taste the meaning. No, we can't delay it any longer. Fatty, I'm going to find that guy right now and give him some strong medicine. Even if it scares him, I'll scare him enough to take the money and take the meat. The fat man jumped out of bed and ran out again. Apparently, this guy finally realized the seriousness of the problem and didn't dare to neglect it anymore. Indeed, Subai was surprised when he learned that he had been in a coma for 3 days. For 3 days, although Fatty had the body of a dog, he still had a way of doing things. Why hadn't the meat been sold yet? Why did it take so long? Could it be that he is addicted to training as a dog, or that he has fallen in love with a bitch from a certain family? However, Subai felt that the former might be bigger. It should be that practicing in Fatty's soul state had unexpected benefits. Living people could help him understand his state of mind, so he deliberately worked hard. But the world of the broadcast story is not that after the massage in a massage club, he still being able to lie there and take a nap now means that the radio is driving people away. Subai lay there in a daze for a while. Suddenly, a white light enveloped it. Call. I breathed a sigh of relief. It is finally over. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 912. Phew phew phew, it feels so good. It feels so good. The fat man wearing a big bath towel walked out of the hotel, feeling completely comfortable. Logically speaking, the environment of a small hotel in a small mountainous county is not that good, but Fatty feels as if he has arrived in heaven. After all, there is no harm without comparison. Compared with the smelly big yellow dog that possessed him before, now he feels like he is in heaven. Being able to take a hot bath as a human is simply beautiful. It's late at night, it's indecent. A voice came from behind the fat man. The fat man laughed hee twice. What are you afraid of, monk? You are so pedantic now. The body is just a stinky skin. What good thing is a thing wrapped in stinky skin? Fatty, I am letting go now. The fat man didn't take it seriously and continued to walk on the street wrapped in his own bath towel. Fortunately, it was night now and this was a relatively remote small county. There were not many people on the road. Of course, there were also a lot of people pointing at it. And some good-hearted people took out their mobile phones and started taking pictures. The mentality is different. The monk walked side by side with the fat man. He was the most thoughtful and could naturally detect the difference in the fat man's state of mind before and after entering the story world. If you can be an animal, why can't you be a human being? The fat man yawned, then pointed to the barbecue stall in front of him that was still open. Monk, can you order some barbecue for me later? Why don't you sit down and eat directly? The monk asked. Damn, I can still tell the difference between free and easy and perverted. The fat man smacked his mouth. You don't know how miserable Dabai and I were in the last story world. It was just at the beginning, and the two of us were still able to do it. When ordering noodles, I could occasionally crack 2 eggs to make fried rice, but then I turned into a dog and lay paralyzed in bed. unable to even drink gruel. The poor monk's mission is in 3 days. I hope that the poor monk can get the same opportunities in this story world as you. The monk's words came from the bottom of his heart. Don't worry, the broadcasting still leaves some room. It may also be worried about what if there is still a shortage of people in the end. At least for us, it is not completely done. And it's completely unconventional and not in line with the style of broadcasting, but I do have a feeling that in this world, the entire society does not know the existence of our circle. When we exist, people do not know that when we are about to disappear and after it is completely dead, it is even less likely that people will know. Even our deaths will be deliberately arranged by broadcasts to the point where even our closest relatives don't care. The fat man stretched out his palm and looked at his palm prints. Monk, sometimes I even doubt whether we really existed. Whether the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors really exist is a story in myths and legends for us. It is difficult to really verify it. Japan's Emperor Jimmu is also similar to a mythical story. The Japanese have incorporated it into their own historical records, but in addition to they themselves, and the rest of them, don't really believe this. Therefore, if we compare it vertically and horizontally, compared to ordinary people, we do not seem to exist now, because we cannot affect the real world. Even if Lychee wiped out a city back then, the world would have forgotten that. A city. But looking back 3,000 years, who would know that the people 3,000 years ago and the people 3,000 years later will really exist, because no one will remember them anymore. Hey, monk, it would be a shame if you didn't write a column about chicken soup for the soul. The fat man patted the monk on the shoulder and got into the car. The monk went to order barbecue for the fat man. About 20 minutes later, the monk came back with a big bag, which was full of barbecue and some food and drinks bought in the supermarket. It smells so good. The fat man took it and ate it to himself, as if he had just been released from prison. But to be honest, compared with the world of the story, the prison did seem like paradise. By the way, Dabai hasn't woken up yet. The fat man took out a piece of tissue and wiped his mouth and asked again. When Gyatso wakes up, he should send a message to the poor monk. It seems that he is not awake yet. What exactly happened to him? The monk asked while driving. What happened? Nothing happened. He is much more comfortable than Fatty. After he died, I still had to possess the doll. He turned into a ghost to fight Bai Vuchang. Then I was unlucky and failed in the upper body. He was so depressed that he had to go to the dog's body, but he cultivated to the 2nd level of the ancient zombie, and the corpse he entered actually turned into his own appearance. Comparing people to each other is really annoying. The fat man complained over and over while eating barbecue. The remnant soul of Princess Dachin gave me a divination before when she was still here. I actually did the divination myself. To be honest, when I stay with Dabai, I will always be the one who drinks soup and has a slightly bigger body. It's not even my turn to lick it. This was also the case in Guangzhou before. But at least, there is still soup to drink. The monk was very optimistic about this. Misfortune lies where blessings depend, and blessing lies where misfortune lies. Who can tell whether it has gotten better or worse? It's clear. I don't care, but I have gained a lot this time, especially in terms of my state of mind. The fat man waved his palm casually and drew a talisman paper directly from the air. A cultivator, after your strength has accumulated to a certain level, the requirements for mental state are really getting higher and higher. If Fatty adjusts this time, he may not only be able to stabilize the level he just entered, but also have a high probability of raising his strength to a high level by relying on the improvement of mental state. Once the audience reaches the peak of the beginner level, the next step is to prepare for the intermediate level. Indeed, time waits for no one. The car gradually drove into the mountainous area and was very close to the top of the mountain. After waiting there, the monk and the fat man got out of the car and walked up. There were several tents halfway up the mountain. Everyone was sleeping here these days. Chen, are you usually slept in a hotel in the county? but since the fat man and he after Subai came out of the story world, she had been sleeping in the tent and guarding Subai. Of course, she was guarding Subai not out of concern, but more like research, because everyone has been through it, and they all know that the radio will help you repair your injuries when you leave the story world, so Subai's failure to wake up now is definitely not due to some hidden injury. It's because he doesn't want to wake up or it's inconvenient for him to wake up. When he arrived at the tent, the fat man saw Buddha doing breathing exercises there. "Hey, I'm in a good mood. I'm actually vomiting at night," the fat man joked. "Generally speaking, it's better to do vomiting in the early morning." "Why, the air is fresh. Didn't you notice that this place has become very clean?" Buddha said. Clean, of course the fat man knew that when Buddha said clean, he definitely didn't mean it literally. The lonely ghosts, remaining evil spirits, ownerless souls, and mountain spirits have all been basically wiped out with this area as a radius. Buddha smiled. "This is indeed a big deal. I think if unless our strength is high enough, we might also be sucked in by Subai." "Has Dabai become a vacuum cleaner?" The fat man patted his belly, dumbfounded. "Then the villagers in this mountainous area will have to put up a sign to worship Dabai in the future. After all, Dabai has changed their feng shui. If the water is extremely clear, there will be no fish. It's neither good nor bad. After all, it's so clean that the previous balance has been broken," the monk said. "Hey, you two, aren't you going to enter the story world in 2 days? He's still a little bit off, so just think of it as a favor. In this way, let him absorb the wandering souls and mountain spirits nearby. How long will he have to sleep to accumulate enough?" Chen Ryu walked out of the tent and said to the monk and Buddha. The monk and Buddha looked at each other and smiled bitterly, but they did not refuse. Chen Ryu was right. Their story world was 3 days later. According to the current time, it was less than 3 days. Anyway, the broadcast would be broadcast when entering and exiting the story world. "I'll help you recover, no need for waste." The two of them sat cross-legged and actively released their soul power. Then, they didn't need to be guided at all. They were directly absorbed by the tent where Subai was. The trend was even getting worse, but it was impossible for the radio to help you recover. The original source, so the monk and Gyatso did not dare to release too much. The monk was the first to stop, and Gyatso held on for 5 more minutes before stopping. These consumptions belong to the recoverable area of the broadcast. If you give out the source of the soul, then the broadcaster will think that you are deliberately committing suicide or it is your own cultivation problem, and will not help you fix it. Chen Ryu sighed. Obviously, it was still not enough. At that moment, Chen Ryu also sat cross-legged and released her soul power. She seemed to be unable to wait to see Subai advance, because Subai advanced by refining souls at the 2nd level of the ancient zombie. He had already become a 2nd level ancient zombie. But it's like a new big wooden barrel has been built, but there is no water in it yet. Chen Ryu couldn't wait to see Subai's breakthrough to gain some insights for herself, but she didn't want to wait here stupidly every day. She is indeed much larger than the monks and Buddha combined. After all, her strength level is here. She has been able to fight a boss-level audience undefeated before, so she naturally has her own heritage. The fat man continued to eat barbecue and drink beer beside him, then shook his head and sighed. Comparing people to others is so annoying. Dabai's treatment is beyond compare to him. Suddenly, Chen Ryu's face changed suddenly, because she felt that a consciousness began to form in the tent and was actively pulling her soul energy. This was not the instinct that she had absorbed before, but was controlled by consciousness. He has woken up. Don't push yourself too far, Chen Ryu warned. In an instant, a huge soul power suddenly burst out from the tent, and the dark sky above seemed to be stirred up by a wind and cloud that could not be seen with the naked eye. The bunch of roasted kidneys in the fat man's hand fell to the ground, with a look of disbelief on his face. Are you going to be so exaggerated? At the same time, in the orphanage shrouded in thick fog behind a tent, a child lying in a cradle seemed to sense something. He frowned slightly, then bit his finger and turned over to continue sleeping. As if in a dream, he murmured, "Daddy."